Right, so Olly Stephens. I want to talk a little bit about Olly Stephens, the young man that was stabbed to death the beginning of this year. And I want to share with you some notes, some things that I've been reflecting on based on his case, and maybe they might be of use to you. Maybe you might find them enlightening. Maybe you might disagree with me. Maybe you might agree with me. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about this because um, I feel like I need to say something about this particular case. I've wrote down three things that I want to share with you, and I'm just gonna kind of freestyle it, and I'm just gonna share with you what I've been thinking about as Kasim, and we'll go from there. Okay, so the first thing that I wrote down here that I was thinking about is the fact that social media is amplifying everything. I think we're living in a world today where most of us, particularly if you live in a quite a wealthy area, a middle upper class area, if you're living outside of London, most of us believe that we are protected from life. But the reality of life is, of course, we're not. In fact, many of us would believe that just because we have raised good children or just because we've been raised in a good family, that we are in some way protected from life. And therefore, in fact, one of the most common things that many people, the assumption that they make is that if we are successful, if we're doing well, if we have kind of made it. If we've got a nice house, if we've got a nice family, if we've got friends around us, then we're protected. But the reality of life is that social media is simply amplifying what is already existing. Okay? And in fact, one of the things that it's doing is glamorizing what already exists and making it more accessible for younger people to access and see what is happening in dark areas. And so one of the things that I was thinking about is, you know, many of us, I wrote a book. The book isn't published yet, but it's been finished and it's been edited. The book is all about conditioning. And one of the things that I talk a lot about in that book is the fact that you need to really explore. You need to expose yourself. You need to expose yourself to the dark aspects of life. You need to expose yourself to malevolence. You need to expose yourself to white people, to black people. You need to expose yourself to gun crime. Where does it come from? How does somebody get arrested? What is a process if somebody gets arrested? And I think we're living in a world today where a lot of people have been protected from life. I remember when I was running last year. I was running across the entire length of Ireland, so I literally ran from the bottom of Ireland to the top of Ireland. And then my stepdad met me, and I started running from the top of Scotland, and I was going to run all the way down to the bottom of the UK. And when I was running through Scotland, I stayed in a lot of B&Bs, and on these B&Bs, a lot of them were, of course, on farms, right? They were on people's property, people had cows, people had chickens. And one of the things that became very apparent to me is how many children people were having. Okay, so up in Scotland, people don't just have one or two children. People have like five, six, seven, eight children. And I remember I was speaking to this woman, and I said to this woman, "Why do people have so many children up here?" And the woman said to me, quite plainly, she said, "Well, because accidents happen." And I thought, what do you mean by that? She said, "Well, young kids are going to be playing, are going to be on the farm. We got tractors around." And she said, accidents can happen because a lot of our children are, they're being touched by life. They're seeing life in its raw form. And if you look around at the majority of us in the UK, the majority of us, we haven't really been exposed to life. Most of us have no idea the process of how a chicken even makes an egg. We don't know. We've never been to a farm before. Most of us don't know the process and I'm using this as a metaphor, so stay with me. Most of us don't know how a strawberry is made. What happens? What are the fertilizers? How do you actually make a strawberry, right? What is the difference between organic and what is the difference between something which is what's the word I'm looking for? What a free fed, right? What is the difference? What does it mean when something is free range? What does that actually mean? And the reality is that most of us don't know. Most of us we've not been raised in an environment where we've been exposed to life. And what happens is, and it's something that I'm seeing more and more and more and more, is that most of us don't know the consequences of our actions. Most of us don't know what happened. You know, I was thinking about this actually because I've been really looking at a lot at food and aging, and I've been thinking a lot about this, where a lot of people don't actually recognize that supermarkets didn't exist. Now, let me ask you a question. If supermarkets, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago didn't exist, here's the question. Where did people get their shopping from? Right? So, a lot of people don't know the answer to that question. I ask people all the time, why is it that you think that a lot of products can last for 20 days, for 30 days, for 6 months? How is that possible? Because when something is fresh, okay, that thing shouldn't last very long. When you go and buy strawberries that are fresh strawberries cannot last for more than 2 or 3 days, right? So you start asking yourself, well, how much stuff do I eat which has been preserved, which is lasting a week, a month, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, etc., etc., etc. And here's the question that you then ask: what is that doing to me? What is it doing to me to be eating food that is lasting 6 months, a year, 3 years in advance? And I know I'm kind of, it's a kind of a weird metaphor for me to use in talking about Olly's story, but the point that I'm trying to get across to you is how much of life have you actually been exposed to? How much of have your parents or you as a parent taken your children and exposed them and shown them where people on a council estate live like? Have you taken your children to not only Marks and Spencer's so they can know what Marks and Spencer's products look like and what it's like in Marks and Spencer's, but also taken them to the pound shop? Have you taken your kids to Windsor or Ascot or Sunningdale or somewhere where it's pretty, an area which is pretty wealthy, and then taken them to an area which isn't wealthy so that you can expose to them and show them the different aspects of life? Right? Have you shown your kids what is the process of what happens if they're arrested? Let's say they get done for drink driving. What happens to them? Right? And I think a lot of parents, and I'm going to get to this in a second, in a moment when I talk about the next point, but I think a lot of parents have been so focused on trying to protect their children that they haven't actually made them ready for the world. They haven't actually exposed them to the world. We've too much mollycoddled ourselves and our children. And, I tell people all the time that malevolence exists. A lot of people don't believe that malevolence exists. A lot of people don't believe that they have their capacity for malevolence. A lot of people don't realize that their own children have the capacity to hurt people. I've spent so much time studying the dark side of life, particularly murder, rape, serial killers, and the amount of parents who say, I had no clue my child was like that. The child that I raised was not like that. I raised them well. And the child has killed 2, 3, 4, 5 different people. And you ask yourself, how could you as a parent, it's not even just about, now, hold on a minute. Let's go back a minute. Of course, I'm not blaming Olly's parents. I'm not saying Olly's parents are anything to do with his death. What I'm trying to say is that we as people, me as Kasim, me as a brother, me as a cousin, part of my role should be to expose not only myself, but to my family, to my friends, to all the different aspects of myself. I ask many people all the time, how many black people do you know? Like, how many, when I talk about knowing somebody, a black person, I'm talking about you've gone to their house, you've met their parents. That's what I talk about. And most people, even though we live in a multicultural environment where you can get access to Indian people, black people, people who are Nigerians, people who are Nepalese, the amount of people who've never actually made friends with a black person, with a Nepalese person, with a Polish person is unreal. And you ask yourself, because I have access to all of these people, I know the ethic and the mindset of what a Polish person thinks. Polish people and their work ethic. So I know what that means. I then can add that onto somebody who's like Somalian, right, or Sudanese, where they have a lot of compassion. They're very loyal. They're very dedicated, and so I have lots of different areas to be able to make decisions and better decisions from. Does that make sense? So I've lingered a little bit more than I should on this point, but I really wanted to get this across to people that the importance of exposure, the importance of actually seeing life. What is the good? What is the bad? What does the good path, where does it take you? Where does the bad path take you? And I just think a lot of us, we've never been exposed to any of that. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I wrote down here is that it's possible to be so busy trying not to be like something that you end up forgetting about who you want to become. So, when I was younger, I don't know if you know very much about my story, but my biological father basically made my mum pregnant at 15, and he basically disappeared off the face of the planet. And I promised myself as I was growing up that I was never going to become like him. Right? I was never going to abandon my children. I was never going to be the kind of father who was absent from my children's life. And I was like, I would never want to have multiple children with multiple women all across the globe. I'd never wanted to become like that. And the issue that I found as I got older was that I was so focused on trying not to become like my father that I never actually identified for myself who it was that I wanted to become, what I wanted to achieve in my own life. And what ended up happening was that I ended up becoming the very thing that I didn't want to become like, right? Well, obviously not end up becoming it, but I ended up seeing that I was going down that path where my father, like my father, right? And one of the things that I think is really important is I think we're living in a world today where so many of our parents, so many of our family members have protected us against the world, but they've never protected the world against us, right? So many parents have been like, okay, don't go here, don't go there because there's bad here, there's bad there. But a lot of parents have never actually said, okay, don't become like this kind of person. Don't end up going around down this path. I think if we go back in history, there was a lot more emphasis on character. Okay, because let me go back. So I talked about this yesterday, actually, in a separate video. But I remember there was a guy called Schmidt who I was studying. He was the guy who was the co-founders of the Eden Project in Cornwall. And he said something that I'll never forget. He said that he goes to a lot of seminars and talks, and people are always asking him, how are we going to solve the global problem? How are we going to solve the climate change, etc.? And he said that he always says to people that you don't need to worry about the environment. You don't need to worry about Earth. You don't need to worry about climate change. All you have to do is worry about the people who you're leaving on the planet when you die. Right? Does that make sense? Because whoever you're leaving on the planet, that is who is going to either accelerate climate change or destroy the planet or overuse the planet. That's what matters most. And obviously, in that, one of the things that I was thinking about is, hold on a minute. So if I'm going to leave the next generation behind, because obviously I'm going to pass away at some point, so the next generation is going to be their responsibility to look after their planet. Where is the next generation going to be learning their morals? Where are they going to be learning their ethics from? Oh, they're going to be learning them from me. Right. So that means I am going to need to become a model for them. I am going to need to practice that which I want my kids to be like. But taking this a bit further, this means that I'm going to have to be the kind of person who is a hero to my children. This sounds stupid and almost ridiculous for me to say this, but I started, I think it was like 6 months ago. Yeah, it was 6 months ago because it's around Christmas. I was working at the time in Argos, the Argos warehouse. And when I was working there, I started asking, there was a lot of young people there. There was a lot of people between 16 and kind of 27. So I started asking people, what are the qualities that you identify to be a man? Tell me, if you were like, this is a good man, this is a man, tell me what that person would look like. And they would tell me all kinds of things, and then I would say to them, is your father like that? And every single person said to me that their father was not like the very thing that they had described as being a good father. And I thought to myself, huh? So they think, so for example, one of the things that was pretty common amongst everybody is that everybody pretty much said that to be a man or a good man, most people identified you as being somebody who's both mentally strong and physically strong, right? So both mentally and physically strong. And whenever I asked people, so was your dad like that? Is your dad like that? All of them said no. And I thought to myself, that's really bizarre. Why are all these young people saying that their own fathers are not like this? And part of it is that a lot of us as parents, we're not showing our children the very thing that we want them to become. But me taking this further, a lot of our parents, and actually this goes back to really a different area. When I'm coaching people about happiness and things like that, this is where I start talking about this topic. But a lot of us don't know what our parents were like before we were born. And a lot of our parents were very, very different human beings before we were born. If we go back in history, most people can tell you, and in fact I hear it a lot from people who are like in their 50s and 60s whenever I interview them. I hear them say, oh, my father was always hardworking, he was always on the farm, he was always in the garden, he was always fixing something. In other words, children actually saw their fathers doing stuff in the house. And obviously this is a very complicated situation because the amount of homes where we've got absent fathers is clearly, like, I don't even know the exact numbers, but the numbers are through the roof. So a lot of parents are not actually models for their children. Their children don't actually see them modeling out the very thing that they should become. A lot of parents are not their children's heroes. They're not pursuing their dreams. They're not highly disciplined. So why would your children be? Why would you be unhealthy and your children be healthy? Why would your children be following their dreams if you don't follow your dreams? And this may seem so insignificant, but it is significant because it's these small little things that when you start adding them up, all of a sudden equate to us having a community. Imagine a community where the majority of the families, maybe 55 or 60% of the community, were all following their dreams, following their passions. They were all and modeling for their children character every day, doing things that they don't want to do, working out, eating healthily. Imagine if you had a community where 60% of the people were like that. It would completely change the children, the dynamic, the way the children would behave. And it's just something that I was thinking about as I was looking at Olly's story. The last point that I want to share with you is that, actually, before we continue, let me go back slightly because I wrote down a couple of things here that I think are really important. So there are two words which I continuously hear from people who are like 50, 60, 70 years of age, which is character and common sense. Common sense you learn by seeing people doing stuff, and character is something that you develop by seeing people around you behaving in a certain way. And neither of those can you get if you're not present in your children's life. I just want to stop there with that point because obviously I'm getting a little bit later in this video and I wanted to make it as short as possible. The third thing that I wanted to share with you is it's not how long you live, but rather how you live. So I used to work in a restaurant some time ago called Revolutions, and there was a head chef there, an Iranian guy, and he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said to me, he said, Cass, it really doesn't matter when, he was like, life is like being on a train. No one knows when they're going to get off the train, right? Getting off the train means that's when you pass away. Nobody knows when you're going to get off the train, but it's about the time that you spend on the train that matters. The experience that you have, how you impact people's lives when you're on that train. That's really what matters. I think we're living in a world today, more so than ever before, where longevity is regarded higher than productivity. Meaning that a lot of people would rather live for a very long time and do very little with their life than live a short amount of time but impact their fellow human beings' life, achieve greatness in that time. And if you actually look at people who've achieved greatness, people who've made an impact on their community, on their family, on others, many of them haven't actually lived very long, right? And as I was thinking about Olly's story, one of the things that I was thinking about is many of us will think that Olly's story is sad, that he was gone too soon. But actually, I disagree. I think that Olly's life really was full of magic. When I hear his parents describing him, when I hear friends describing how he was, this guy impacted people on the very short period of life that he was on this planet. But also bigger than that is, I think a lot of people tend to think that when it comes to purpose, when it comes to to the reason why we're here, to destiny, a lot of people tend to think that the destiny has to be achieved when we're alive, but I don't think that's true. I think that you can achieve your destiny even long after you're gone. And I'm thinking about the fact that Olly has managed to show me that I need to really be more present, that I need to really be a better person, that I really need to inspire people around me, both my parents, my friends, people within my community, so that I can show people that not to go down that dark path. By Olly being stabbed, he's showing me that, my God, there is malevolence in the world, so I need to be a little bit more careful. He's showing me that, do you know what? Even though there was that he was manipulated and all of these things happened to him, do you know what? He was still a good person. And I thought, fair play to him, because we can get bogged down so much by money, by success, but ultimately you will never see a removal van behind a hearse, will you? Right? All of these possessions that so many of us aspire to, a BMW, having a massive car, all of those things really don't matter. What ultimately matters is the impact that you have on people, how you make people feel. And I'm just thinking that actually, you know what? I want to live the kind of, based on seeing Olly's life, I've really refocused on really living the kind of life that makes me proud. That if I die, God forbid somebody stabs me, kills me, shoots me, I want to, as I'm taking my last breath, be able to say, yeah, but it was fun. Yeah, but I went for it. Yeah, but it was good. I wasn't super rich. I wasn't super successful. I wasn't had global fame. But you know what? I loved it. It was good. I had fun. I had laughter. I had joy. I met people. I introduced myself to people. That's what I want in my life. And Olly's story made me think of that. So that's what I wanted to share with you. I don't know whether it means anything to you or not, but that's what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much for watching, and may Olly rest in peace. Cheers, guys. Bye for now.